In 1966, Ford built a car that beat Ferrari at Le Mans. The race Ferrari had won 6 years straight. The GT40, it was designed from scratch in under 3 years. All because Enzo refused to sell his company. Almost 60 years later, Ford released the Mustang GTD that was the first American car to lap Nürburgring in under 7 minutes. But the nearly 60 years in between is the story no one tells. The GT40 started this chaos, and the GTD just finished it. Welcome to Off Camber. For 60 years, Ford kept asking one question. Could American performance win on engineering and not just cubic inches? They asked the question to us in 1965. Then in the 80s, they asked again, and every single time, we told them no. This is the story of how they finally made us say yes. And it ends with a $327,960 Mustang that has Le Mans tech under the hood and still a V8 to go with it. It starts with Henry Ford II trying to buy Ferrari, not a merger, a buyout. Ford's legal team had spent 30 days in Maranello working through the paperwork, and the deal was essentially done. Then, at the 11th hour, Enzo read the fine print and realizes that Ford controls the racing program, and he killed the deal right there. The only reason Enzo even started building street cars was to fund the racing, and now he had to give that up? Nope, no way. So the Deuce went back to Dearborn with his tail between his legs on what he thought was going to be a victory lap. I don't think Furious covers the feelings the man was having. The directive to all of Ford that followed is simple. Beat Ferrari at Le Mans no matter what it takes. So some suits got on the phone and made that happen. The men who got the phone call that day were Roy Lunn and John Wyer. Roy had designed the Mustang 1 concept, and it was the whole reason he got the job at all. Wyer was the ex-Aston Martin team manager, and Ford Advanced Vehicles was established under his direction. In June of 1963, a couple of executives arranged a meeting with Eric Broadley, the owner of Lola, and the Mark VI was picked as the starting point of the GT40. At nearly the same time that they were establishing the GT40 race program, Walter Hayes had been building Ford's total performance identity. He was Ford UK's PR head at the time and a former journalist. He understood that motorsport and product credibility were the exact same conversation, and he had watched it firsthand himself. He understood something that got proven right for the rest of his life. Winning in motorsport doesn't just sell cars. It attracts talent. It attracts the good engineers. It sets a standard that the road car program has to reach for. It builds a culture that can't be satisfied with ordinary because ordinary doesn't win races. It finishes mid-pack and no one remembers your name. Like the legendary Ricky Bobby once said, if you ain't first, you're last. The two programs, they ran side by side, both helping to position Ford's place in motorsport history. The GT40 program was having issue after issue. In order to fix the problems that they were having, they called some crazy Texan. That crazy Texan's name is Carroll Shelby. He was brought in to run the race program. And then 1966 happened. 3 GT40s crossed the finish line at Le Mans together, 1, 2, and 3. They beat Ferrari on a track it had dominated, and it just got beaten by a company that didn't have a Le Mans program 4 years earlier, and the only reason it really had one at all was to prove Enzo wrong. If that isn't the most American thing I've ever heard, I don't know what is. At the same time in Europe, Hayes is funding the Cosworth DFV engine. It was a V8 designed specifically for Formula One, and it turned out to be the most dominant F1 engine of its era. When that engine was finally retired, it ended with 155 total wins, 12 drivers' championships, and 10 constructor titles, all with the Ford name on the valve covers. 2 continents, 1 company, and the same philosophy running throughout. You commit the resources to build it right, and you don't blink. Write that one down, because everything else in this video is either Ford living up to that or fighting to get back to it. So now we fast forward to 1983, and Ford of Europe is running 2 simultaneous programs that both push that total performance program forward. Both use Cosworth engines, and both require road cars to go racing. Walter Hayes, he's still in the building. The first program that he did, the RS200. Ford needed to compete in Group B rallying, and Group B was the most dangerous era in motorsport history by a margin that isn't even close to anything else in motorsport. These were incredibly light cars, with the fastest of them producing over 500 horsepower, all running on public roads, with spectators standing at the edge of the stage. It was the golden age of rally. The RS200 was a mid-engined, all-wheel drive, 1.8 liter Cosworth turbo. It put out 450 horsepower in race trim, and the chassis was designed by Tony Southgate, who happened to be a Formula One engineer. The body came out of Ghia and was co-designed by a young Ian Callum. Yeah, Ian Callum, the same guy who would later design the Jaguar F-Type and the Aston DB9 and the Vanquish. It absolutely explains the timeless beauty of the RS200, and one of those will still make you stop and stare if you see one today. The FIA required 200 road cars for Group B homologation, so Ford built exactly 200 of them. Then in 1986, after a string of fatal accidents, Group B ended up getting banned. One of the accidents involved an RS200 that killed 3 spectators at the Rally of Portugal. Ford had built the most sophisticated rally car in its history, and it ran for less than a full season. The latest Evo variant, the one that ran the BDTE engine, never even got to compete. The second program that was running simultaneously was the legendary Sierra RS Cosworth. Stuart Turner, who was the head of Ford Motorsport in Europe, defined that project in 1983. And then he called Walter Hayes to get organizational buy-in from Ford. Hayes responded by personally visiting the Ford dealers across Europe to sell them on stock in the car. Dealers told him they could move 1,500 units, but Hayes needed 5,000 units for Group A homologation. He doesn't stop at 1,500. He can't stop. He can't blink. The Cosworth YBB engine was a twin-cam, 16-valve, turbocharged 4-cylinder that put out 300 horsepower in race trim. To legally race with all of the best upgrades, Ford needed to build 500 Evolution cars. And then the RS500 Cosworth was born. The RS500 dominated the World Touring Car Championship and is the most successful touring car Ford ever built. One detail that connects the continents, the Sierra RS Cosworth ran a Borg-Warner T5 gearbox, the same gearbox that was used in the Mustang. Ford's programs weren't sharing hardware by accident. They were sharing knowledge, they were sharing philosophy, and they were doing it across the Atlantic. All the while, American customers were telling Ford that they didn't want a turbocharged 4-cylinder. While that was all happening, Ford of Europe was winning championships with exactly that. Then, that same idea bled over here to America. 3 attempts, all with the same result. What? You again? Hang on a second. Are you still watching and you haven't hit subscribe? Look, I'm doing coilovers, I'm doing bushings, I'm doing control arms. I'm doing all this for you, and you haven't hit subscribe for me? Come on, man. Go down there. I think it's over in this corner right here. Hit subscribe. It's free. What's it gonna hurt? All right, sorry to interrupt. Back to the video. In 1979, the Fox body Mustang launched with a turbo 2.3-liter 4-cylinder as an option. The problem was, it only put out 131 horsepower, and with the carburetor setup it had really poor drivability. Nobody bought that car, and it quietly faded away. Strike one. Ford wanted to try its hand again, so in 1983, they refined that formula and released the Mustang GT Turbo. The 2.3-liter Lima engine got Bosch electronic port fuel injection, forged pistons, lower compression, and computer-controlled boost. It put out 145 horsepower, which is only 30 less than the 5-liter. It also had a lot less weight over the front end than the V8 that Ford had brought back to life for the 82 model year, but they brought that one back with a huge advertising campaign. The 4-cylinder turbo car was better in corners, it got better fuel economy, and it only cost $250 more than the 5-liter, which only made 175 horsepower, but the 4-cylinder didn't sell. Strike two. Then in '84, they introduced the SVO. In 1980, however, Ford had brought in Michael Kranefuss, the former competition director of Ford Europe. He was here to run Ford's Special Vehicle Operations, or SVO. The man who had run the European Motorsport program now ran the American Performance Development program, and he brought that philosophy with him. And the SVO got everything right. It had an intercooled 2.3-liter, 175 horsepower at launch, 205 by mid-85. It came with 16-inch wheels, which was the first Mustang to ever run them, and it also came equipped with Kone adjustable shocks, 4-wheel disc brakes, better weight distribution, which made it faster than a 5-liter around a road course. It was a way more sophisticated and better equipped car than the 5-liter. And it sold 10,000 units over 3 years. Ford killed that one in 1986. Strike three. 1986 was the same year that Group B got banned, and the same year that the RS200 program ended. But these American four-cylinder cars didn't get killed because we were less cultured or didn't understand the finer things in life. It's because the American market in 1984 was still grieving. The 1970s energy crisis didn't just raise gas prices, it killed the identity of our cars. Emissions regulations and fuel economy mandates spent an entire decade neutering the muscle car. When the Fox Body 5-liter started coming alive again, that was people getting something back that they had spent 10 years without. Something taken from them by mandate, not by choice. And we've all seen how that works out. Ford walked in with a turbocharged four-cylinder and said, hey, trust the engineering. The market heard, here comes another reason to give up our V8s. We weren't ready for a new approach to performance, or even what the new definition was at the time. We had invented drag racing. Fire-breathing cars were our thing, and a four-cylinder turbo just didn't sell the same idea. Ford had walked in with a turbocharged four-cylinder and asked us to move forward, while we were still right in the middle of getting something back. The market wasn't ready. That's not the same as the market being wrong. We needed more time and a bigger reason to believe. With Group B banned and the SVO killed, the philosophy went quiet. Or did it? SVO wound down, but the SVT group was formed in 1991 under John Coletti. SVT stands for Special Vehicle Team, and Coletti believed in the philosophy and the culture. They did, however, stop trying to sell us on the European approach, and went back to speaking to us the way we wanted to be spoken to, in displacement. But they stayed with forced induction as part of that philosophy. The engineering discipline stayed. The chassis tuning awareness stayed. The understanding that dynamics and power belong in the same conversation, that all stayed. Only the presentation changed to fit what we asked for. Then they introduced the SVT Cobra. The Cobra R track cars were stripped cage track-only Mustangs sold directly through SVT to buyers who proved that they intended to race them. The Cobra Rs in the years they were produced were SVT's recurring no-compromise track statement, proving that the philosophy had never left the building. And it was not so quietly setting the table for a Cobra you could actually street drive. Then it came, all of it in one single package. The European handling formula combined with the American want for a big V8, in a streetable package. It had 390 horsepower from a supercharged cast iron, 4-valve, dual overhead cam, 4.6-liter V8. It had the best factory-tuned suspension Ford had ever put in a Mustang to that point, and it came with independent rear suspension, not a solid rear axle like every other Mustang GT to date. The car was track capable from the showroom floor, and it was famously underrated in power output. The people that did dine of them usually saw around 370, 380 at the wheels, which is way over 390 horsepower at the crank. Ford had sandbagged the horsepower output in the best of ways. It was still the muscle car we wanted, it still had the displacement, but it was built with the chassis dynamics that traces directly back to the spirit and philosophy that Crane Fuss and the SVO program had brought about. Nobody wrote the think piece connecting these dots. The engineers knew what they were doing. The philosophy was dormant, not dead. In August 2004, Ford celebrated its centennial birthday in a big way, and they introduced the world to the 2005 model year Ford GT. It had a 550 horsepower supercharged 5.4-liter 4-valve V8 engine, whose heads were a revision of the 2000 Cobra R. It was built with a super plastic formed aluminum monocoque chassis and aluminum bodywork. The car had a top speed of 205 miles an hour, and it had a $150,000 price tag when they fully loaded the thing out, and it was only built for 2 years, with a total of 4,038 units. The media called it a victory lap and a nostalgia play. Ford, on the other hand, was quietly proving to itself that it was something else. It proved that the toolbox still existed. The company could still build at that level of performance, that the total performance standard was still alive inside of Dearborn. The GT40 was a Lund, Wire, and Shelby project. The Ford GT was a from-scratch skunkworks project that proved that the company had not forgotten how to do it. It was the same equation as the Terminator, using displacement and forced induction to find the answer. But it was in a trophy case. It was a halo car, and it wasn't attainable for the everyday guy like you and me. Ford wanted to unify those two philosophies. And the real proof is coming. What Ford learned bolting a turbo to a 4-cylinder in 84 doesn't stay in 84. It ends up under a hood of a car that you can afford now. On June 19, 2016, the 50th anniversary of its 1-2-3 win at Le Mans in 1966, Ford went back to Le Mans, this time with a unified theory, and it did so to prove it again. The new Ford GT came with a twin turbocharged 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6 and 647 horsepower. It had a full carbon fiber tub, active aerodynamics, and it reached a top speed of 216 miles an hour. The road car was developed simultaneously with the race car by a company called Multimatic, who also happened to be one of the most respected chassis engineering firms in motorsport. The road car and the race car evolved together with the same aerodynamics, the same suspension geometry, and most importantly, the same build philosophy. There were 1,350 road cars total over its whole run. When they were first released, you didn't just get to buy one of these things. You didn't just get to call a dealership. You submitted an application and Ford reviewed them. Then they approved or denied those applications. For Ford's first attempt back at Le Mans in over a decade, they decided to enter the GTE Pro class, and they raced against teams like Ferrari, Porsche, and Corvette Racing. And on the day before the race, the officials made Ford add weight and dial back the boost for a balance of performance penalty. And you know what? Ford still won with a turbocharged V6. The philosophy that the SVO had tried to teach us in 1984 with efficiency, aero, and chassis dynamics had just beaten Ferrari and Porsche at Le Mans on the 50th anniversary of the GT40 doing the same exact thing. Kranefuss brought that philosophy from Europe to America in 1980. Walter Hayes built it into Ford's organizational DNA starting in 1962. It took 54 years to realize, but it was the best engineered car Ford had ever produced, and it won Le Mans. So this loop has run 3 times in this story. In 1984, 200 road-going RS200s were built to homologate for Group B rally. In 86, 5,000 Sierra RS Cosworths were built to homologate for Group A touring car racing. And in 2024, Ford built the GTD road cars alongside the Mustang GT3 for Le Mans to win on Sunday and sell on Monday. Ford had been building road cars to go racing for 60 years. The GT Turbo didn't survive the culling. The SVO didn't survive it either. But the reason they existed, the philosophy that started in this organization in 1962 by a handful of men hell-bent on winning without a blink, never went away. It went underground in 1986, then it re-emerged in 2003, and it finally proved itself in 2016. Then all of this work came out the other end in 2024 as a Mustang. So here it is, the Mustang GTD. It has a carbon tub, pushrod suspension that drops the ride height on the fly, a 5.2-liter V8 screaming to 7,600 RPM, an active aero that stalls the wing flat down the straight and slams it up vertical for the corner. It's the same wind tunnel obsession that started at Le Mans. John Wyer died in 1989, Walter Hayes in 2000, Carroll Shelby died in 2012, and Roy Lund died in 2017. They never got to see this car. They built the origin story of it, and Michael Kranefuss and John Coletti built the bridge that got them there to today. This car belongs to those 6 men, every single bolt of it. The men who stared down a market that didn't want performance and built it anyway. And this is the thing that they were chasing the whole time. 60 years of work paid in full. This car was the first American car to do Nürburgring in under 7 minutes. And it's a Mustang. And that $327,960 Mustang you're never going to buy already paid for yours. That halo is never going to stay at the top. It trickles down to normal street cars. The turbo lessons from the SVO, the aero and the chassis math that nobody wanted back in 1984, all of it bled into a Mustang that you can actually afford. It's in that 5-liter or the EcoBoost that's sitting out in the driveway. That used GT some kids saved 2 years for, the turbo 6-cylinder someone tuned to compete with V8 cars in a lighter and more agile package, those cars are good because somebody at the top refused to build them cheaply. That's the whole thing. These insane projects that are built for racetracks, they're the reasons the rest of us get to have fun for $30,000. The GTD proves that obsession never died. The car in your driveway is the receipt for it. The Mustang GTD, well, it's technically banned from GT3 racing. The road car suspension and active aero technology is too advanced for GT3 regulations. Ford pushed the GTD beyond the spec the race car runs under. The road car is more sophisticated than the race car, and that's an interesting turn of events. Walter Hayes wrote something in 1994, 30 years after Le Mans, 6 years before he died. He was looking back at the Ford GT program and the Ford racing program that he had helped establish in the 60s, and he wrote, "There is still a place for passionate adventure." He never saw the car those programs would eventually produce. The GTD proved him right anyways. The GT40 started it, and the GTD finished it, and the story in between is the one worth knowing. I'll see you next time on Off Camber.